Welcome to Connect to Joy. Your host, Carol DeChaine, is an intuitive spiritual guide for practical matters and Marconic multidimensional energy practitioner. Her quest is to help you realize new possibilities, discover and release what holds you back, and enable you to manifest an inspired life filled with joy. Join us on this journey of transformation. Now, here's your host, Carol DeChaine.
Welcome, beautiful spirits. Thank you for joining me here today. I'm Carol DeChaine, and my passion in life is to help you find your joy, to release what holds you back, and assist you to quantum leap your journey of self-discovery. I'm an intuitive, certified in life and business coaching, and a Marconic multidimensional energy practitioner and teacher. So if you're ready to start creating that life you've only dreamed of, that you deserve, let's have some fun. And let's get started right now. Today is all about connecting to your guidance. So, what does that mean to you? How do you connect? And what kind of answers do you get? Or maybe you don't feel like you get any answers at all. Are you more a stay grounded and listen to your body type of person? Or maybe you connect to a higher source of some type in meditation for guidance, or garden, or take a walk in nature, or something else that makes you feel closer to having some sort of guidance. There are no right or wrong answers, but today we explore possible guidance with my guest and how astrology and human design can play a part. If you haven't heard of human design before, it's getting pretty popular, so give it a listen and see what you think. Before we go any further, let me introduce my guest, Mario Sarmiento. Mario is an astrologer, human designer, astrocartographer, and musician. He enjoys nature in both its inner and outer surroundings. He has 2 YouTube channels, one titled Uranian Streams and the other Sirius Archer. His website is at www.plutonicplanes.com. Pluto is one's truth, which can take one a lifetime to come to terms with, and in his readings, Mario beckons us towards this truth. All this information will be in the episode descriptions, so if you didn't quite catch that, you have an opportunity. You can go down and see exactly how it's spelled later after the show. And Mario also has a special for our listeners, which I'll tell you about later. Welcome, Mario.
Hi, Carol. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little more about your journey and how that helped you find guidance along your road to transformation?
Sure. So growing up with a very prominent Pluto in my chart, there's definitely been experiences of trauma in my background. So once I started going to school, studying literature, I couldn't help but continue to search for just different ways to understand myself. And in literature, I discovered archetypes, especially with mythology. And eventually, when I got back into astrology, I started utilizing the archetypal myths that are present in the asteroids in one's chart. And so I started utilizing that to understand different facets and nuance my understanding of the astrology chart. And this really opened up my understanding of who I was and what I was here for in this particular lifetime.
So what struggles have you faced that would help people if you shared them with them?
Like a lot, I imagine a lot of people, I experienced a form of, I would say, trauma, which introverts someone, which almost causes them to absorb their environment. Usually this happens when someone is enmeshed in a family, and it causes them to be what we commonly call in the New Age empaths. How I see it, though, is it's to some degree, it's a capacity to ignore the self and not nurture the self and one's own awareness of one's own body and being present in it. So I utilized and had many different modalities in my 20s to explore this. I went to a psychic school for a while, and I explored traveling and discovered different systems, and that all came together to kind of help me deal and progress in who I was. And sometimes there was ingress as well. I know training to be a psychic, I don't know how much that really helped. I already was a psychic in some sense through the trauma, because often through trauma, people become very psychic in order to be safe in their home environment where they grew up. And when one grows up with trauma, one is always super aware of their surroundings in order to feel safe. So it's almost like people that are traumatized in their youth, they almost become trained psychics in a way. No one really talks about this very clearly. And so it's something I like to bring up in my own life experiences in terms of trauma.
And don't you find, too, with psychic, just to mention that for a moment, that everybody is, but some things bring it out of you? I find I also went to a psychic school and graduated from it just because it helped me trust myself more. More than anything else, it was like I already had the information. I just thought it was something I was thinking. I didn't think it was psychic awareness or anything, or being empathic for someone rather than actually getting information. So it was more a trusting thing. Didn't you find that when you went to school, it kind of made it more aware for you that you went, oh, that is being psychic?
Yes, and that's a great parallel to what I'm going to share today as well, because recovering and healing from trauma or just life experiences that can be traumatic is a form of retrusting yourself, because you've lost trust for yourself because something's happened to you and you don't know where you stand in regard to that. So getting the formal training as a psychic is definitely something that reasserts a trust. Oh, okay, here's me and here's everyone else. And all the systems seem to kind of do that. I mean, I would say when someone gets an astrology reading or human design reading, I'm not going to share with you anything you don't already know about yourself, but I'm going to formalize it in a way where you can separate yourself from it and perceive it. And then if it resonates, back into yourself. Does that make some sense?
It does. And I know that since we're talking about getting guidance to change, that's something that helps you to realize that is actually part of your guidance. That's psychic information you're getting.
Yeah, without a doubt. And knowing who you are and separation and distinction to what is around you is something that has to be reasserted in different ways, especially when one has experienced deep trauma, because there's always going to be at some point an overwhelm. And when someone gets overwhelmed or whelmed, there's a conflation between what they're experiencing in their body in contrast to what's going on in their environment. And it's important to make a distinction and say, oh, okay, have those reminders, have that ability to be confident in the self and say, oh, here's me and here's everyone else.
Right. It's healthy to be able to separate yourself.
Yeah, that's what health is.
So with astrology, though, how did that play a part with the struggles that you went through and getting through them?
I think astrology was great for me in the sense that I've always been a very mental person, very, very intellectually astute, very studious. And so I was often, when I wasn't playing or into music, I was often stuck in my left brain, processing things through the intellect, reading a lot. And astrology is actually very much a mental discipline, because you're dealing with thought forms and you're dealing with the mind in terms of its conceptions of what Taurus means or could mean, or Scorpio, or the 12th house, or different aspects of the chart. Astrology is an opportunity to utilize archetypes to find an expression of who you could be. So it's limited in its scope in the sense that it's very much stuck in the mental sphere. And so for me, it was a great bridge to other systems because I was already very mentally oriented. Does that make sense?
It does. And then we also have human design in the title of the show. Maybe people don't know what that is, although it is gaining in popularity because I had never heard of it, and all of a sudden it's coming at me from all different directions. Maybe it's just I'm supposed to learn more about it. Could you give us a little background on that so people can understand, and maybe how that also impacted you when you started working with that?
Sure. So human design, I was on a trip to Brazil, and I was traveling, and I met someone who shared with me quite intensely that you need to get a human design reading.
Do you love when that happens? It's like, okay.
It was funny. And she told me who, of course, when you get back to the United States, here's the person you talk to. And of course, I had a gut response. Okay, good. That sounds great. So I went back home and I got a reading from Chetan Parkins, who was one of the core members of Ra Uruhu's original human design system. From there, I started to learn about this system, which, in contrast to astrology, is more about the functionality of the physical body, of the vehicle we are in this lifetime. And human design provided a type of very clear picture of what my body and what the energy in it wants to do and how it works in both a physical and energetic fashion. And this was quite profound, but not initially, because I think it took me a while to really process it through my gut. For those who know human design, I'm the manifesting generator type. So my authority is my sacral, it's gut authority. And it did take some time, but it had to do with the nuances in my chart. As an MG, my sacral channel goes to the throat, et cetera, et cetera. The point I'm making is human design was a system that kind of slowly encroaches upon all the cells in the body. And they say it takes 7 years after you get your first human design reading to process and to encompass all the information into your body's intelligence. So human design was a real journey in that sense. A way to understand it in contrast to astrology is, while astrology is more of a mental discipline in terms of understanding what's going on, and it's also based on interpretation, because you're interpreting the different archetypal definitions of the signs of the houses of particular mythological archetypes, and you're interpreting that in your life. Whereas with human design, you're getting a very visceral process to experiment with your physical body. And so its aim is to describe the functionality of your physical body, even though they're very similar. And now, Carol, I'll just go ahead and define human design as it's usually defined, just for the audience.
Okay.
So how it's commonly defined is it's a synthesis between ancient systems and modern scientific systems. The most simplistic way to convey this is through the I Ching and the Western understanding of genetics. With the I Ching, it's an ancient mystical Chinese book. It has in it these 64 hexagrams, which are like 64 paragraphs of poetry. Now, this poetry is written in the language of nature, and it uses nature to describe all possible situations on our plane of existence. And astrology, of course, does this too with the 12 signs encompassing a full 12-house chart. We have, in the West, we have biology, we have genetics. And so they have found in DNA coding that we have 64 codons and 6 bases per codon. So that creates almost an exact parallel with the I Ching. So once we have that, we interpret the chart, and it is an astrology chart underneath. Human design is using 2 astrology charts, both at the moment of birth and 3 months prior, when they claim that the spirit comes into the neocortex. And so in this sense, what we have is an exact overlay of astrology, genetics, and the I Ching all together. And from that, we interpret what the physical body, what the functionality of the physical body is in this particular lifetime.
It sounds very complicated. I know when I saw a picture, it was like, oh, this makes a little more sense now when it showed the body and all the different arrows and things, because that was like, okay. It's also very cerebral.
Yes.
As you had said, it's very mental, so that when you read it, you go, oh, wait, let me reread this stuff again, because it takes a lot of time to really get it.
Let me reflect on that for a sec, because that's an important point. It is very left brain initially. Once absorbed, though, it just becomes a bodily intelligent understanding.
I hadn't heard anybody explain it that way before. I was like, what? But I just had an introductory course to it. I didn't do beyond that, so I don't know a lot about it. Just enough to get myself in trouble.
We'll see how much trouble.
So how did that help you with finding your guidance when you were doing the human design? I'm not sure that I got that part of the answer.
Initially, I think it was more of a confusion or a conflation of things, because I think for myself, for my particular authority, everyone's different. But I had a particular authority, or I have one, that's a gut response, but it's not really heard in my body. So it's a very fascinating nuance. Like, I cannot even really hear my gut response or always feel it, because it's something unconscious for me. And so for me in particular, it was very alien to me. Like, I didn't understand it. But eventually in time, I understood that when something is right for me, when I feel it's right, I just get up and do it anyway. But the problem I was getting into was I would immediately, having not really been conscious of my gut response, I would go to my mind if I didn't act it out. And then I would say, I wonder, should I do this? Should I do that? I'm a very heavily mental person. I mean, that's in my astrology, obviously, and in my design. And so
I call that overthinking.
Overthinking, right.
That's me.
And we know that as a collective, as humanity, in this point in reality, we know that not all of us are meant to be operating our energy from the mind. But because we live in an air-based culture, the Western world is very air-based. It's very based on the mind and chatter and talk and thinking, right? So it's superimposed upon us to over accentuate and over focus on everything being a product of mentality, which is not true. Like some of us are very grounded, gut oriented, go with your gut beings. And that has been coming into culture more in the last 10, 20 years. But overall, people still think it's alien to go with your body's emotional response or gut response. They're like, no, that I don't know what my body's feeling. Just,
I must think
yeah, I have
through.
to think through it. I have to worry about it until I come up with something.
And it's funny because my last guest was all about abusive brain chatter. So it was all about being nasty to yourself. What you say and what you think. That's the overthinking thing, but that's to the extreme.
The trauma systems talk a lot about the inner critic, right? The inner critic that attacks you. And they're right on that, when they nuance that point.
Some people take that as part of their guidance because they're hearing it, so they're thinking as part of their guidance, like, no, the opposite. Take the opposite, please. It's like, let me help you.
Oh, yeah. And that's something that's not brought up enough is the fact that we live in.
Well, talking about guidance again, I was wanting to ask you, because you have astrology, you have, a number of different things you work with. What is your main source of guidance that if you're looking at change in your life, how do you connect in order to get your answers? You said your gut, but is that your actual main source of guidance?
It's a great question because as a main source of guidance, maybe there's a contrast you're bringing up here. Maybe nuance this for me because in general, I think guidance is something that I'm working on through all the elements all the time, the thinking, the feeling, the gut response, the processing, the experiencing of the elements outside of myself and within. All that's a part of the steady guidance and growth of who I am. Maybe what you're asking, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe you're also getting to the pinpointing what my ultimate kind of sense of guidance is. Is that what you mean? Like when I need a real decision or something?
Well, I mean, yeah, because let me just explain how I
Okay.
get it, and then maybe that'll help you understand my question better. I feel like I connect to my higher self rather than directly to God or something. I feel like that is part of God. So it's just a being that knows more than I do, so to speak. And so when I feel that way and I take that time to connect, I get answers really clearly sometimes. I get my infamous nod that some people know about when I have doing my intuitive sessions. And when I get that, I know for sure the answer is yes, but sometimes I don't get anything. And then the answer is wait and see. And maybe my answer will be the guidance will come from outside because I've asked. So the guidance comes from people on TV. They say something and I go, oh, that was my answer. Or somebody randomly saying something because I haven't asked them the question, what I should do. It just comes up in conversation that I didn't even start usually. It's not always like during my connection time, it's also afterwards. So the guidance comes from all different directions, but it's because I've asked my highest source. And sometimes I get a definite no, but most of the time I get either a yes or nothing. And the nothing either means it doesn't matter, or it means because it's a human thing and it doesn't really make any difference in the scheme of things. Or it's something that I get an answer to later. So my guidance, it all comes from my higher self, even if it comes later. So I guess that's kind of what I'm asking. I know you're in your body, you're getting something as well, but I'm wondering if that's because my nod is in my body, but it's also a little bit more than that.
I love the way you put that too. It was very nuanced, very beautiful. I would say for myself, I use the same language as you do. I like to use the concept or the reality of the higher self. I like to have that sense that there's something guiding me that's unseen, that I have connection to, but may not always have an awareness connection to. Or maybe I do and I'm not always like present to experience it.
That's about everybody. Being present is like, I prayed, I'm done, I heard nothing, I'm moving on. It's like, wait.
Yeah, and I love the way you put that. If you don't get a direct answer, you're aware to your environment of what can be speaking to you in response to that. Because that's generally what is said in human design for the generators is We live our life in response. Everything's brought to us and we respond to it. And they say anything can be you can respond to anything, a bird chirping, a change in air. The rain could be an answer to a question. You turn on the TV or your YouTube and you hear someone say this and you're like, wait a second. Is that related to my life?
I went to a movie that I thought was the most boring thing in creation, but I was with other people who were enjoying it. And I thought, oh God, why am I here? As soon as I thought that there was a line in the movie, I went, that's why I'm here. One line in the whole freaking movie for 2 hours going, why am I sitting here?
That's a great reminder, I think, for everyone too. The synchronicity movement, that we experience being in the world and knowing that our higher self is setting things up so we're going to hear it in this way or that way. To nuance this further, because I think a lot of conflation and confusion comes in, especially with astrology, because astrology is so much related to tarot and magic, that I like to make this distinction. It's really important, I think, to understand that when you are utilizing, an understanding of there's something that is guiding you, something, in this lifetime, whether you call it your higher self or something else, I think it's important to understand that we're not here to know the outcome of things all the time or directly or right away, right? Or at all. In other words, it's about the journey, right?
Right.
And I bring this up because I have with clients these conversations at times. And sometimes people are like, well, I'm not going to get into this unless, the outcome that I want is guaranteed. I love to say in response, nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is ever guaranteed. This next moment is not guaranteed. So it's important, I think, especially because these disciplines are mental, at least initially, to give up the knowingness at times. In other words, like you've said in your example, to just give it, don't perseverate in your mind over it, but to let it go and say, oh, the universe will, bring me the answer, when I need it, or just bring it to me when it's correct.
As long as you're paying attention.
Right. Yeah, that's the tough part. In order to pay attention, you can't be perseverating on something because then you're not present in your body to perceive when it comes. So I like to share that what it is, I think, to a large degree, is not fearing the future, as many have argued that's what fortune telling is, right? But rather being a little curious about it and just maybe asking a couple of questions just to help you navigate yourself, but not asking questions out of like dire desperation. Having the faith in your own self to know, right, I'll have the answer when it's correct, when I need it. Whether it comes from within my body or without my body, same distinction really. I mean, everything is flowing and moving. Things are always moving within and without.
And also, I know I have clients as well. What ways do you find people block themselves from connecting to their guidance?
As we discussed, I mean, initially we know it's the mind. The mind is so amplified in our culture. It's given almost a ledge for us in our culture to throw ourselves off the ledge, off the cliff.
Uh-oh.
You know what I mean? Like we're pounded with mental associations and mental energy constantly. And it's up to us to turn it off or to put it aside. Never before in culture have we carried around an instrument that provides us a vehicle of mercury, of expression, of thoughts, of air, of ideas, constantly. Never before have we lived in a culture that denies so extremely any moment of silence to really check in with your body and see how you're feeling, how you're actually feeling, like how your organs are feeling, your heart or your gut or your kidneys, and to like put your hand there and actually like talk to your organs, or you know what I mean? Give gratitude for like what they're doing for you, or to feel your physical body and what it needs and go, oh, I need a walk right now. My body wants a walk. So I think to answer that initially, I'd say the mind. But again, also it's a very general question in the sense that, of course, anything can be a distraction. You know what I mean? Anything we over focus on. And focus usually starts with the mind. So that's why I say the mind.
Well, don't you find that a lot of times when they need guidance and they come to you, instead of coming to you, they don't prioritize it for them to ask themselves?
Yes.
They get busy with the universe, the world, everything that's coming at them, children, all those things that are happening. So they don't even take the time. Whatever way they want to find their guidance, whether it's just taking a walk or it's actually a meditation, which I always talk about, but I rarely do, because I find other ways to make it a meditation, not just sit down because I fall asleep or my mind wanders to the grocery list or something. So I prefer to do something like walking or just staring at my trees, which to me is not closing my eyes, but it feels like I'm getting a connection. But you have to take that time in life.
Do you think, because you mentioned this earlier, and this is such a pivotal point, do you think that trust of self has to do with this?
Yeah, probably because for me, I find with my clients that they block themselves mostly subconsciously because they want something, but they don't know why they can't do it. So we have to work on allowing them to realize that there are more possibilities out there for them that they don't even see for themselves. They block themselves so strongly that they don't even see that there is a certain possibility beyond what they're seeing. That they have to do A, B, or C, and maybe the rest of the alphabet is out there waiting for them because they can also have that. And they don't even see those things as possible for them, or even, it's not even in their mindset. When I help them expand their awareness, then the blocks start coming up because then they're, I'm not good enough. So all that stuff happens. All those limiting beliefs show up. So that's the way the spiritual coaching works that I work with people. It's fascinating how people don't even see that they can have certain dreams because they don't see it's even possible.
Yeah, the freedom and the prisons are in the mind, right?
Yeah. I mean, they don't trust themselves because they don't even know there's anything to trust. I mean, they think they're fine. But when they look at the more possibilities and they go, oh my God, I can have that too? No, that's somebody else can have that. But why could I have that?
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense that when you explore further, you see all the prisons they're in and they see it, and they go, oh, wait a second, maybe the prison door's open and I'm just hanging out here.
Right. They handcuff themselves and they actually have the key.
Right. Key in one hand, handcuffs in the other, right?
Or they have the key to the lock on the jail already. It's in their wallet or their purse, and they're going, I can't get out. But you don't choose to.
Yes, yes.
We lock ourselves in with certain people and with certain situations when we have the key. We just aren't willing to go there or don't think we can.
There's this great line from a Devo song. This great band I've been hanging out with. They do this Devo song cover. It's a variation of this lyric where it says, freedom of choice is what you want. But then in the middle of the song, it changes to freedom from choice is what you want. Oh, man.
Yeah, it's a distinction, but it's so true that sometimes we just go with the flow because it's easier than making our own choices.
Yeah. Yeah. I think making choices is something one has to take responsibility for, right? And so I think because of that, the weight of that.
Yep. Responsibility is a big thing, but it's also freedom and empowerment. So how are you going to look at it?
Yeah.
I was curious before when you were talking about human design or astrology, if it helps you and you get into it, then you start to believe in the system. But do you have to believe in it to have it work? Because, there's some things that you almost have to believe in to get it into your being in order to have things work, and other things you don't.
Yeah, no, it's a great question because we live in a culture which promulgates belief systems. And in a sense, we do need belief systems to live our daily life. You know what I mean? To have hope, to have a sense of groundedness. And a lot of different systems have talked about the limiting of old belief systems stuck in our mind, stuck in our body, limiting us and preventing us from realizing that we could do this or we could do that. How I've looked at it for a long time, and it's just kind of my perspective on it and what I learned from reading. And I was really into these Val Valerian published books in the 2000s called The Matrix books by Leading Edge. The author of those books was really very, very strong about the idea that a belief system, if you look at the word belief, it has the word lie inside of it, L-I-E. And so he was big into the idea that a belief system can be limiting, but we know that in order to grow, we might grow up with this belief system and then we might change it to this belief system or that. I mean, it's a part of our growth, right? And so what he said that beliefs are something limiting in themselves. And he said the reason that is because having a belief means that you're trusting something outside of yourself. So in contrast, he made the contrast to knowingness. And this is something I've, of course, taken on and nuanced myself to what degree I can, in the sense that knowingness is something within you, right? Sometimes we just might say something or someone asks a question and we give an answer. And they say, well, how do you know that? And usually my response is, I don't know. It's just what I know. It's just right now you asked the question and it just came out that way and it feels like a type of knowingness. And as I expressed it, it felt like the truth. Well, where's your proof for it? Where's your evidence for it? I don't know that that's needed, because experience is what tests knowledge. Any of us could have a belief system. We can adopt a belief system that's outside of ourselves, like some kind of energetic that exists. But I feel like what we can do in human beings as we gain greater trust in ourselves is to know that when we come from a certain knowingness within ourselves, that that's what our truth is, and it could maybe change, in a year, in 5 minutes. But that knowingness just came through. And I think it's something that a lot of us don't yet trust.
I started out being more clairvoyant, and the knowingness came as I started raising my vibration. It just went into it almost, so that I didn't need to hear it from as much of an outside source, as it just connected and became the response I had. In general, when I actually do reach higher and actually connect to what I consider my higher self, then I get a feeling of completion, but the rest of it is just the knowingness is without even having to shift knowingly, if that makes sense. It just happens automatically now because I feel like I've raised my vibration higher.
Yeah, it's all frequency, it's all vibration. That's the soup we live in. What people are listening to is our frequencies, interacting. And I would say I'm on the same page there, because even when I hear others, if I tune in and center myself while I'm listening to another, I can sense what frequency that is, whether it's a truthful frequency or not.
That's very handy.
Yeah.
In today's world, especially.
Especially. Very especially, yeah.
I think that a question that I'm going to get from my listeners is if you have any kind of a step-by-step process that you guide your clients through, since you have all different types of things that you work with.
What I've been doing is it's a case-by-case kind of setup. Some clients sometimes want all three things. Other clients don't know. They're like, well, it sounds intriguing that you do this and that you do that. So just let me know and I'll get this one reading. And I say, okay. And so it's true. It's not always one particular way I do it. Sometimes, like, I'll give you an example. There's a certain type in human design called projectors. And they really need to understand human design intellectually. Like, it's really important for them. They're a very different type. And again, they don't really need to. We don't live existence on basis of a need necessarily. Sometimes when someone comes in with an astrology reading and I peek at their human design and I see their projector, I might go back to them and say, hey, I peeked at your human design. I want to share with you. Is this something I could share in part of the reading? Or is this something you want just have that human design reading? Because this is something you may want to know. You're a very unique being. You're very different in this way. And I'll express it to them. I've been very direct with it, and I've been looking at it through a case-by-case situation, because I do three different things. I think it does confuse people, and it's hard to really grasp that it's all related, of course, but in what avenue do you want to express or have this expressed within you? Like, I can help people select maybe what gems are good to amplify certain weak parts of their body. That's one part of it. Or I could say, what area have you grown up in? How do you feel about where you live? Are you thinking about, or they might tell me, I'm thinking about moving. Okay, let me look at your planetary lines throughout the map of the United States or of the world, and let's see how different places are for you, and what places might express different things. Not necessarily better than the other, but just bring out different aspects of you. I know I kind of went wayward with that answer. Hopefully not.
Well, I was actually later going to be asking you, because I looked at your website and I saw that there's 3 different kinds of sessions. And I was wondering if you could explain just shortly what each one you kind of do. I know astrology people might be a little more used to, but maybe you do it a little differently, and you could just briefly explain each type of session so people would know when they look on your website what it is you're actually offering.
Sure. The astrology session I liken to as kind of an initiation, kind of initiatory reading. I'm looking at your chart, and the nuance that I add is from my study in literature and mythology. I like to add the different archetypes, mythological archetypes that have been ascribed to the asteroids. And so when I do an astrology chart, if I see any significant asteroids in significant places in the chart, then I'll add it to the reading in order to nuance one's experience of who they are and what might be roles or general archetypes they're playing in this lifetime. So I like to do that for the astrology reading. The astrocartography is a reading where I create a relocation map. So not just their astrology chart as it is, but as it is when someone moves to, or someone's looking at moving to a different area of the world. And so that creates like a new astrology chart, and it creates an additional chart where we call it astrocartography, where it's this, and Jim Lewis created this in the 60s, 70s, I think. What that creates is a whole map of the world, and then these lines all over the map. They signify the 9 different planets. And so one could move to their Venus line, let's say, or their Pluto line. But then that's nuanced even more because maybe Pluto is a stressed out planet in your chart. And so maybe Plutonic experiences is not what you want or not what you can really handle in this lifetime. For example, I live on my Pluto line, but I can because my Pluto is very calm. It's not stressed out by geometry with other planets.
So do you need to do the regular astrology reading before you would do the card? I can't even say the other name, the map one.
Oh, the astrocartography.
There you go. I knew I was heading in the wrong direction, so I thought I'd just stop.
No, one doesn't have to. I mean, one may have had an astrology reading somewhere else, and have a sense of their chart. I do that 2-step process in the astrocartography. I don't just look at the map and your planet and say, oh, if you go to Venus, your Venus line, you're going to find love. Oh, if you go to your sun line, you're going to find a great job and you're going to work hard and you're going to be successful. I nuance it with what planets are strong in your chart.
So if I would have moved to Arizona or New Mexico, you could tell me the difference between the two.
Yes.
And I may be calling you about that. Next year I may be moving. Haven't decided where yet. Somebody good to have in my back pocket to find out information.
And, and where there's no planetary lines, it's usually neutral. It's a neutral area. Your chart will just act as it is.
And then what about the human design?
So the human design component, I liken it to a lot of these trauma healing disciplines that have come out in the last decade. Like, somatic work, body talk, muscle testing, right? I mean, muscle testing is much older. A lot of these different system parts work, for example, working with different parts of the body and their consciousness of what they want to do. I liken it to that because as you've seen in the map, right, in the little human map it has, there's these little kind of channels where you can see energy, you can see red or black. And then there's spaces where it's just white, it's open. And so when one looks at a human design chart and just takes that extra step to imagine those little red and black lines moving without, always trying to get to one area, which is the throat, which is manifestation into the world. One starts to gradually understand that the body is a mechanism that is moving and changing relative to its environment, and that we're being influenced energetically. Right now, me conversating with you, I have access to parts of my intelligence that I don't have access to when I'm not talking to you. Our auras are intertwining to some degree.
And some make you feel better than others.
Oh, yeah, that's a significant point. I mean, what the aura is doing, I think that transcends human design in that sense because, right, if we're frequency beings, we're moving songs.
Oh, I like that.
When is the song going out of tune, right?
Yeah.
We feel that in another. So with the human design reading, I do the full human design intro reading. And I like to do it that way because that way they have a full foundation, not just intellectually, but cellular, so that their body can process the information over its 7-year process. And so the human design is definitely a good amount of time. And it definitely is a very powerful read on how the body is expressing itself and what its real authority is. And so for the person who gets that reading, usually depending where they're at physically, are they even in their body, right? Are they hovering above it? Trauma takes us out of our body, for example. So human design may not resonate with someone not fully in their body.
And I wanted to make sure before we go that I ask my one question that I always ask all my guests, which is, what 3 things do you want people to take away from this show to get them started or to continue on their road to be able to connect to their guidance?
Oh, great question. And in 3s, of course. The first, I would say is, and it's the most important, is creating a relationship with your own body, with your own self, and nurturing that relationship. And I'm not implying that no one has that, of course. I mean, wherever you're at, wherever someone is at in their relationship to who they are, not who they are as a mental conception, but to their body, to listening and hearing their body, and actually sitting with whatever their body's feeling. That's super challenging and difficult for all of us. So I would say the first thing would be being able to be in your body and listen to it. And the second thing I would say is creating a relationship with your body and your awareness, a relationship to feeling what you feel. For example, like when we're not busying ourselves with distractions, maybe the body might feel a lot of anxiety from something that's occurred. So can you sit with that anxiety? Feel the horror and the terror of that anxiety. Can you actually sit with it and let it feel itself out? If you're able to do that, that's a relationship that you're creating with your body. You're listening to it, creating a back and forth. You're creating a biofeedback process. So again, the first thing being in your body and listening. The second thing, really nurturing a relationship with your body. And I would say the third is understanding that on some level, or maybe understanding on a really deep level, is that we're in charge of the meaning that we ascribe to the events we experience in this lifetime. And I think that once we develop a relationship with our own body, with our own emotions and feelings and things that are moving through our body, that we can begin to grasp that there's really no difference with the outside, except for that boundary we call the skin or the aura. And that it's important to understand and see that boundary and create a relationship with the outer world, not based on, fear, right? Or not based on something limiting, but rather based on an exploration, a curiosity of who we are in this lifetime and what needs to be expressed. So I think this 3-step process I'm describing is the body, the boundaries of the self, and the outside world, and relating to it in such a way where there's trust, because, all of us have one obligation in this lifetime, and that's to share who we are.
I really want to appreciate you and thank you for all that information, because it's a different way than what I would talk about. And that's why it's always so much fun to have guests to get different, not just opinions, but different ways of looking at things, different angles that sometimes people need to see, because my 3 things, which I always share as well, are different. And they're really different, which is why I was like, that's really cool that yours are so different from mine. Because for me, my main 3 things I want people to remember when they're trying to find their guidance is to remember to make a habit of it, take the time for it, to connect and not let that stuff get out of the way. Don't go to bed at night and go, oops, I forgot. Then do it then. Whatever is happening, don't forget to take that time for yourself, because you deserve it. And the second thing for me is to look at different ways to find the guidance. Because sometimes people do it by meditating. Sometimes in the meditating can be connecting to the body, but just sitting there. And other times it's gardening, it's walking the dog, it's whatever works for you, as long as you're breathing at the same time and being aware and as fully present as possible, so that you can listen to your body, to your spirit, to whatever you want to communicate to. And my third thing is to stay attentive to the fact that answers come after your connection. Like I had said earlier, remember to stay aware and remember what you've asked for, because it may already be happening, but if you're not paying attention to the answers, maybe it's a 3-step process to get your answer, and you got some when you were praying or meditating or whatever and connecting, and then maybe there's some more information you're going to get somewhere else, and maybe 2 or 3 times you're going to get it. But you need to pay attention so you can put the whole puzzle together, and then that would be your answer.
Yours are expressed so much more practically.
Well, see, but that's what I call myself, a spiritual guide for practical matters, right? So you want to do it in a spiritual way, but you want your reality to be what you want it to be. So let's look at that too, and not just a spiritual way to do something, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You want it to change your life the way you want it to.
It's interacting with the mundane everyday events, which is really important.
Yeah. Because sometimes those stupid events just get in our way, don't they? Well, before we go, I want to make sure I mention your special offer. I said that at the beginning, and I haven't alluded to it yet. So your special offer is if anybody out there emails Mario, and I'm going to have the email also in the show notes, but it's watcherofworlds@gmail.com, but the of is O-V as in Victor, so it's a little different. That one can throw you if you're not paying attention. Say you heard him on the show, and you shared the show link with 2 other people. He's offering a reading at 20% off, as long as the email is sent before December 20th. So if you think about it, don't wait too long. Just go ahead and give him your information. Tell him what you're interested in, and I'm sure that he'll answer any questions through his email that you have. And if you'd like to know more about Mario and human design or astrology or astrocartography, or if you'd like to know more about me, my spiritual coaching, my intuitive readings, or my Marconics multidimensional energy work, you'll find them in the show notes, links to both of our websites and our YouTube channels. He has 2 and I have 1. So you'll see those links there as well. Thank you all out there for joining us here today. And I want to thank, of course, especially my guest, Mario Sarmiento. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. And until next week, be courageous and reach higher. Your guidance will be there for you when you need it. Just trust yourself. And remember that transformation is a journey and not an end destination. Just take one step at a time. Get the help you need and get out there and find your joy.
Thank you for listening to Connect to Joy. If you love the show, make sure you rate, review, and share this podcast. And subscribe so you never miss an episode. Contact the host, Carol DeChaine, with questions and comments, ideas for future episodes, or if you would like to become a guest. And remember, transformation is a journey and not an end destination. So be kind to yourself, because you are already enough to have the joyful, limitless life that you desire.